Good morning, 10th grade English class. How are you guys doing today? I'm so excited because we are back into our poetry and we're going to be reading one of my favorite poems today. It's called Sea Fever by John Masefield. Hopefully, you did all of your work yesterday and you are up to speed on all of those terms that go along with our poetry. Terms like symbolism, imagery, personification, anaphora, which I'm going to go over today. I don't think I went over that yesterday. Alliteration, assonance. We'll be talking about themes today. So I'm going to go ahead and kick the tires and light the fires. I'm not very good at these little cliches. Anyway, I want to tell you a little bit about John Masefield. You may not realize it, but he was the poet laureate of Great Britain for about 30 years. And I don't know about you, but I don't know a whole lot about poet laureates because it's just not something that I think about very much. So just so you know, a poet laureate is someone that is kind of the official poet for a country. And in Britain, when they name a poet laureate, they're actually kind of like a member of the royal household. So it's a really big deal to be poet laureate. Some that you might have heard of in the past are Alfred Lord Tennyson and William Wordsworth, also poet laureates of Great Britain. We also have poet laureates of our country, the United States. And so for bonus points, you can look that up and send me a message or send it in a private comment on Google Classroom, and I'll give you some bonus points today if you want to look that up. That will be for you guys that are actually watching the videos. Now, today we're going to learn a little bit about this poem. John Masefield, of course, was born in England. He actually was an orphan. He was born an orphan. He was very poor. And so back then, back in the olden days, if you were an orphan and if you didn't have a lot of money, there weren't a lot of options open to you. So a lot of young men would join the Marines, the Merchant Marine, not more like a Navy. So that's what he did. He joined the Merchant Navy and he spent a lot of time on the sea. And you'll be able to see that today when we read our poem. And he spent a lot of time on ships for several years, just traveled all over the world. He spent some time in America when he was homeless here for a little while. But he wrote about the things that he saw. You can really almost feel like you're on the ship with him when you read his poetry. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be reading Sea Fever. So without further ado, we're going to erase this. And actually, I'm going to erase the top part of this. And I'm going to leave these words at the bottom so we can come back to them later. But as we read the poem, I want you to be asking yourself, do I see imagery? Remember, imagery is where you can almost see it, taste it, feel it, touch it, experience it through your senses, hear it. Symbolism is something that stands for something else. Something means something different to somebody other than what it is. Personification is giving human characteristics to something that's not human. Anaphora, this is where you see something that's repeated. Like when we read Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech, there were a lot of instances of anaphora where he would say, let freedom ring, let freedom ring, let freedom ring, over and over. So when you see things repeated like that, that's what that's called. Alliteration, repetition of consonant sounds. Assonance, repetition of vowel sounds. And theme, what is the overall theme of the poem? All right, so here's our poem. I have given you a link to a Word document on Google Classroom. Also, this is in your book on page 507. So if you have your book, you can be turning to page 507. So I put this up on the board. Okay, this is the third stanza. I'm just going to kind of move it over here. And we might need another little piece of tape there because that is sitting up. There we go. Okay, nothing like our little homemade classroom here. All right, so when we read this poem, I also want you to think about the rhyme scheme, and I want you to think about the meter, the stressed and unstressed. See if you can figure out what is the primary type of meter. I must go down to the seas again, to the lonely sea in the sky, and all I ask is a tall ship and a star to steer her by. And the wheels kick, and the wind's song, and the white sails shaking, and a gray mist on the sea's face, and a gray dawn breaking. I must go down to the seas again, for the call of the running tide is a wild call and a clear call that may not be denied. And all I ask is a windy day with the white clouds flying, and the flung spray, and the blown spume, and the seagulls crying. I must go down to the seas again, to the vagrant gypsy life, to the gull's way and the whale's way, where the wind's like a whetted knife. And all I ask is a merry yarn from a laughing fellow rover, and a quiet sleep, and a sweet dream when the long trick's over. Okay, so first we're just going to talk about what some of the words mean that you might not know. So when you start here, he's talking about wanting to go back to the sea. So the whole title tells you what it's about. It's like spring fever, sea fever. He has this longing, this great desire to go back to the sea. And when you know what his life was like, it makes sense because he missed the sea. He spent a lot of time on the sea, his youth. I can tell you, as someone who's gotten older, that the things that you experience in your youth hold great value for you, at least if they were positive things, hold great value for you when you are older. You look back and it's just fun to have really neat memories of different things. And so try to enjoy your youth and try to make some really good memories because you'll be glad you did later. All right, so this is all, imagine that you're on the sea as you think about this. Okay, so he's on a ship. The wheels kick. This is when you're on the wheel of the ship and you're steering it and something happens unexpected, like maybe there's a huge wave or a big gust of wind, and all of a sudden it moves the ship and it makes your wheel kick and you have to get it back to where it was and try to get back on track. So that's what that's about. The wheels kick and the wind song. Here it kind of describes it. You can kind of see what it looks like, a gray mist. As you get down to this part, the windy day, the flung spray, the blown spume. You might not know that word. That word just refers to the kind of the foaminess and frothiness of the ocean. So you can almost kind of see that, and you can hear the seagulls crying. You can see this imagery at play all the way through. The vagrant gypsy life. I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice today. Okay, so the vagrant gypsy life. A gypsy is someone that moves around. They're never really in one place. And that's very much like it is if you worked on a ship. You would be always moving from port to port to port, always on the go. So a gypsy life, you don't really have a home. I mean, your home is the ship, but the ship's always moving from place to place. Gypsies, would put up tents and that sort of thing. I don't know if they do that so much today. I remember years ago, we used to have a lot of gypsies that would come through Memphis, and it was really interesting to see how they just would come through one season and then they were gone. So we still do have gypsies around, but gypsy can just refer to that idea of not having a home, of constantly moving. Vagrant refers to homeless, so you put those two together and you get the idea of what he's talking about here. A whetted knife would be a sharpened knife. If you've ever whetted a knife, that just means you're sharpening it. It's not like wet like water. It's with an H, and that refers to sharpening. All right, so a merry yarn. If you don't know what a yarn is, this is not like knitting yarn. This kind of a yarn is a tale or a tall tale, an exaggerated story. So, like you hear people talking about, I caught a fish this big. Well, that's the kind of the idea that these sailors would come into port. They would all go into the different, bars or taverns or places like that, and they all have a story. They'd have a big story about something that happened. And they were very much exaggerated, but it was fun. It was entertainment. They didn't have television, and they didn't have iPhones, and they didn't have things to entertain them, so they had to actually talk with each other. I think that's a good thing. From a laughing fellow rover, so that would be someone else that's on the sea. And then this last line, in quiet sleep and a sweet dream when the long trick's over. Okay, so here trick is not like what we think of as trick. Here, in sea terminology, a trick would be a long voyage. In fact, during John Masefield's days as a sailor, this would have been possibly even sailing from England all the way to China and all the way back with stops along the way and time in different ports. And it would have been possibly a whole year for one journey. So that would be a long trick. It would be a long, long journey somewhere. So that's probably what he's talking about here as we're talking about the sea. Okay, so that's just a little bit about what some of the words mean. Let's talk about rhyme scheme. Okay, so you have 3 stanzas, 3 quatrains. So there are 4 lines each. Here it's kind of hard to see, but this is your first line, second, third, and fourth. So they're all on different pages. So there's only 3. And so what is our rhyme scheme? Well, we have sky, A, by, A, shaking and breaking. So that's going to be B, B. So A, B, B. Then we have tide, denied. So C, C. Flying, crying, D, D. And then life and knife. Oh, this is hard to stretch. E, E. I really miss my smart board, guys. Rover and over. F, F. All right, so that's your rhyme scheme. A, B, B, C, C, D, D, E, E, F, F. So pretty straightforward. All right, so now let's look at the meter. It changes a little bit. It doesn't have the exact same meter all the time, but you can get an idea. I must go down to the seas again. Okay, so this is actually marked in your book if you have it, but so you have unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, da-da, da-da. Then this is unstressed, unstressed, stressed, da-da, 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 da-da. And then we have unstressed, unstressed to the lonely sea and the sky. All right, so a lot of it is very much the same kind of pattern. So it's not strict, it's not a strict meter, but it's kind of the gist of it is iambic pentameter. All right, now let's talk a little bit about alliteration. Do you see some places where there's a repetition of consonant sounds? We're not going to point out all of them, but let's see if you can just find one. Okay, one that sticks out to me is this one. And the wheels kick and the wind sung and the white sails shaking. You have the W, and you also have the S, the song, sails, and shaking. So that's a good line that's got a lot of things going on in there. All right, what about assonance? Do you see an example of assonance, repetition of vowel sounds? I like this line right here. And the flung spray and the blown spume and the seagulls crying. I don't know, maybe that's not the best one. Let's see if we can find another one. You have call and call, which is a repetition. You have both, I think this is called consonants, when you have the same one inside the same phrase, but you don't have to know that. All right, well, we're going to move on. Next, personification. I was kind of looking up some things about this when I was kind of preparing, and some of the things I read to me didn't really seem like personification, but one thing that I think you can definitely say is personification is when he talks about the ship. So here he says, and all I ask is a tall ship and a star to steer her by. This is something we're kind of used to. We're kind of used to seeing ships referred to as feminine. But definitely, if you're calling a ship a girl or giving it a human quality, that is always personification. So that's a really good example of personification. So now to the overall theme. The overall theme, what is this entire poem about? Well, we already talked about how it's about how he has this longing for the past. So there's a lot of memories in this poem. So one of the theme is just the memories of the past, remembering things that happened. Also, this idea of wanderlust, this idea that you want to travel and not really have a home and just go from place to place to place. I have a friend who, her husband was in the military. He's retired now, but she told me like a year or two after they were, had moved here to Paragould, they are, in one place, and she's like, I'm just ready to move. She goes, I just want to move to like Arizona or something because we moved all the time in the military, and she kind of liked that it was always changing. So sometimes it's kind of hard if you've had that kind of life to change back over and do something different. And so for him, it's just the reverse. He'd love to go back to being able to wander and wander and go and go and go. Also, this in this poem, the sea, he has a fever for the sea because what does the sea represent for the author? The sea represents, what does it symbolize? Here's our word down here, symbolism. The sea symbolizes what? Hopefully, you said happiness. Happiness. He's remembering these great memories with great happiness of his life before. So I hope you liked this poem. I really like it. If you don't, oh well, too bad. You had to learn about it anyway. So I'm going to be posting an open book quiz for you to take online, and this will be one of the poems that will be on your final test. So have a great day, guys.